What's up, loser? Oh.
Yeah, like this right here. Danger zone.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like you hit something like this, you don't have the ankle to compensate. Video. I am on my way back from Tahoe. Stopped in Salt Lake City with my buddy Mason. You can find him on
Everything's Buff Runner, right?
everything is Buff Runner. So quick little stop here. I'm gonna move my legs before I get back on the road. Mason's gonna take me to a nice easy trail here in Salt Lake. I've just got a nice easy 45 minutes scheduled, so we're gonna go catch some views and just have a little bit of a time. As you can tell, this looks exactly like my runs in St. Louis, so we'll see if anything changes. Yeah, like this right here, danger zone.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like you hit something like this, you don't have the ankle to compensate,
Yeah.
and so you get your knee kicked. And that is.
That makes sense.
That'll make you. Yep. Still see no difference. This is basically just a slightly greener Missouri with like everything that's not the same. All right, run is done. What we do? 4 miles, Mason?
Yep.
We got 4 miles. About 10,000 feet of elevation, or relative to St. Louis. It was, what did we climb, like 5?
500.
We climbed like 5, nothing big. We went up, caught a couple of views, and then just kind of cruised. Got some sick views. And yeah, also brand new on Cloud Runner Pro. Deals their new trail shoe. First run, could not be more impressed. But unfortunately, my time in Utah is about to come to an end. I need to shower, eat, get back on the road. I'm gonna finish this guy up with a little Q&A, but yeah, absolute blast. And if you don't come out here and just get it, why people are excited, that people that love this area, I get it.
What's up, loser? Oh. What's up, Bubby? Hi. 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 What's up, loser?
Good boy. All right, I got the dog at the dog park, and I'm gonna go ahead and knock out a few questions I got. I put it up on my Instagram, and yeah, so we're just gonna knock out a little Q&A to wrap this episode up. So let me pull this up. First question I got: any mental sticking points during your race? If so, how did you navigate? So I kind of talked about this in my wrap-up video, or wrap-up of the actual race video. But to be honest, the biggest mental hurdle I had was quite simply clueless. I really had no idea what to expect in that race once it got going. The small little bit that I felt like, okay, I've got this little bit in terms of like understanding like how the elevation's gonna go, didn't end up happening because they had to change the course so much with the rain. That was the next day. Actually, it was snow. That was crazy. But the reality is I just had no idea what was going on or what was going to happen. And so to be honest, you can use that one of two ways. That could be a panic thing, or that I chose to use that as like, what am I getting fired up about? You know, I don't even know what's coming. I'm just gonna let it happen. I'm just gonna be open to whatever experience happens. And the reality is most of the other like mental sticking points, I feel that I worked out in my training. So for me, like other like, you know, fears of the unknown or things that can always go wrong for me as an amputee can be all device related things. I knew everything was in as good a shape as it could be in terms of my prosthetic. After that, you're now looking at skin issues and sweat issues and skin breakdown and other injuries that can occur because of that. That's, you know, the hardest part being is you can't see under the hood while your leg's on. And sometimes you feel these things way too late. That's why all like the intentional training and gradually building the volume and gradually building the time was such a big deal, because I learned how to receive those signals, how to find those signals, what were gonna be my common issues, how do I prevent these issues. You know, a lot of that ties back into nutrition and hydration plans. And from there, the only other mental sticking point I really felt was around the altitude. And again, what am I gonna do about it? I'm already here. And so I just simply was like, I used what a friend of mine introduced to me, inversion problem solving. And I like to use the raising a child example to explain this method or thought process. And so you got a kid coming, I gotta keep making sure to pay attention to my dog, especially if he poops. I don't wanna be that guy that doesn't clean up after their dog. It's pretty uncool. The inversion problem solving method applied to raising a child. We're pregnant. We're gonna have a child. Okay, I can think, what gives this kid the best life ever? And use that as the basis of my planning, or I can invert that problem and say, what can I do to F this kid up the worst? And then now I use that question, I answer it, and I create all systems, all plans are about avoiding those biggest mistakes. From that perspective, we avoid making the biggest mistakes that can mess that child up the worst. So, altitude, what could I do to accelerate altitude issues? The biggest thing I came up with is breathe through my mouth. So, inversion method for problem solving, you keep your mouth closed. And so that was a big thing I focused on. And the kicker, like the funniest part is, there is one picture that I got that I thought was like definitely the coolest of the pictures. It's this one. And the only thing I see, you know, the scenery's awesome. All I see is this, my freaking mouth open. But actually, no, I worked very hard to prevent that from being a problem, an issue, or anything like that I was gonna deal with, by taking away the biggest mistake that I could make, which again, breathing with my mouth open at altitude, especially when I am not acclimated. So those are the mental sticking points, how they were solved, and they were solved in preparation. They weren't solved on the go. That gave me room to solve the things that needed to be solved on the go. Like my first experience on a ridge was pretty effing scary. I'm glad I didn't have to worry about other things. All right, next question. Next adventure. Next race is in about a month, August 3rd. I will be doing the Badger State 50K. It's a very flat track. It's rail trail, and it is a 50K. That's up in Wisconsin. Hard to go with. I don't know. It's not the world's biggest adventure, especially relative to what I just did. But after that, we are headed to Grindstone in Virginia, and that will be an adventure because that's going to be a very hard 50K. I'm excited about it, but it's going to be very hard 50K. It's supposed to be one of the tougher tracks, you know, just from looking around. That wasn't why it was chosen, but timing is why it was chosen, and location. I've got a friend out there I'd love to go see, and that was one of my favorite parts of my Tahoe trip. And I actually got to link up with some people that maybe I'd only met once, and you know, had a good time. You know, a couple people from my Ecuador trip and things like that. or training with ATF. So I got to do all that, and that was really, really lucky. So yeah, so that's the next adventure. That's probably what it is just probably Grindstone is I would consider the next big adventure. The Badger State 50K it's a training run. It's a long training run and gets me to feel the distance for the first time. All right, so we're not gonna knock out a million questions. We're gonna knock out one more. So this is question number 3. Oh, there's the police. And there is the nosy neighbor. See if he gets a howl. I don't think so. He will like howl at the moon at sirens, and it is just from the depths of his soul, and it is just hilarious. So, all right, last question we're gonna knock out. And I'm gonna read the whole question because if you're an amputee, you get it. If you don't have that perspective, the whole question really actually, the whole phrasing of the question is actually really good insight. So it says, what do you do to be able to run so many miles at once? Is it the leg health, socket system, or just getting out there and stacking the miles? I find that when I have 12 to 15 mile weeks, after 2 to 4 weeks, my leg breaks down. I start having a lot of skin problems and pains everywhere. So I'm gonna go into his 3 questions and add one more piece of the puzzle that kind of ties on to the last piece about technique. So, leg health. I am going to start with, we're gonna call this actual general health. But yes, if you have poor skin health already, you have poor circulation already, it is a factor, and you have to be more cognizant. It doesn't mean that you can't do it, it's you have to be more cognizant. And again, we're gonna get into the stacking miles thing where this ties into there. But general health. So there's 4 big pieces of general health in terms of how well we can take care of ourselves. Hydration, nutrition, sleep, and stress management. And I'm not gonna dive into all 4 of those, what that means, yada, yada, yada. This is that interesting. I would love to do more of this sort of stuff. But, so, why these are so important. For context, for those of you that are like still unsure what the problem is here. So I use a carbon fiber socket. Like, there is nothing about this thing that moves around. They make car parts out of this. What's up, buddy boy? But anyway, so there's no movement in there, and it is based off of a shape of your limb, however long ago it was made. And there are tiny little changes always. So even like a mature limb you're never really the exact same, but the closer you are, the better your fit is. And why that's important, and having that good socket fit, is the better your fit is, the less movement you're gonna have inside of the socket. So you have this thing that doesn't move. We're gonna see how well I can, whoa. The picture of this setup would probably be pretty hilarious. So we have our socket. This thing doesn't go anywhere. We have our limb. It goes in here. And when these things operate well and our fit's good, it moves like this. It becomes an extension of us. Now, when I start to shrink, I now can move into this. And what we get now is we got friction, rubbing, and that rubbing breaks down skin. And the inside of a socket is, I have not intentionally demonstrated, but I've done other videos where I've explained the whole system. Socks, liner, other socks, socket, sleeve. I've got all these, it's the worst healing environment on earth. So what happens when your skin breaks down? You kind of have to get out of your leg. You kind of have to, in a sense, big skin breakdown is giving away walking. And nobody wants to do that, which is why it's really important. Which is why this question is really important for the amputee athlete, especially a high volume, high duration, something like running. So, especially hydration and nutrition, these have huge factors on things like swelling and inflammation and, just that. So if we are poorly fitting in our leg, we're gonna have more of these issues. It's gonna break down, the vicious cycle goes. And so it's really important. So that is a huge piece. You wanna be an athlete, but this isn't it's not different than being able-bodied. The consequences are amplified though. So you have to treat yourself like an athlete. You have to eat like an athlete. You have to respect yourself by eating well, sleeping well, and all these sorts of things. Like I bet you would find as an amputee, if you did a week where you crushed it. You got the full eight quality hours of sleep a night. And then, all right, next week, we're gonna intentionally only get 5. I bet your socket fits very different week to week. And so like that comes into play. So yeah, so if your socket fit is inconsistent, it's hard to be consistent with your activity, especially running. Like running is a tough one to keep up if you don't do these things well. Second part of that, socket system. So he's referring to suspension system, and I've gone over this on Instagram. I think I've gone over this on here. I'm not breaking down all the suspension systems, but I am going to just simply get into this. They all exist. Everything from my fully elevated vacuum, which I believe to be on one polar extreme, to just a basic pin lock system, which I believe to probably be reverse polarity, is the other end of the spectrum. For most people, they all exist because it has solved someone's issue and has helped somebody thrive. So there isn't a bad system. There may be a bad system for you. There was a bad system for me, and then there's great systems for me. The fully elevated vacuum, and I'm gonna add sweat socks into this one because they interact very well. So I use the Valor socks from Swiftwick. I think these are definitely the best one on the market. I am in the process of beta testing a prototype right now, and it's very good, but I think it's got some room to grow and some room to improve on the design. But it makes a huge difference. I remember when I first got my prosthetist, he was new, he was like, hey, I think you should try these out. Somehow in 20 minutes, I could tell things are different now. This is way better, and I was right. I also felt the same way when I got put into my first fully elevated vacuum system. So I get regularly asked, Sam, what's this little thing sticking on the back? That is a vacuum pump. They are typically distally mounted, so underneath. Mine is posterior mounted based on the componentry, and my personal secret sauce, there's no secrets here, I'll tell you everything. Ask questions and I will tell you all of them. What was such a big piece of my deal was as soon as I got that, again, I just felt a huge, like, things are different. My game has leveled up. I knew it was right for me. And so I've got this sleeve on the outside that keeps air from coming in. That vacuum pulls air out. It doesn't hold the amount of suction. It will gradually loosen. And then as it reaches a certain point, it tightens back up, it pulls air out. So for me, I think that this is extremely valuable, especially when I'm sweating and doing this stuff for long duration, which I guess if we actually go, I'm gonna take a small step backwards. The other big piece of the puzzle is understanding your hydration and nutrition needs mid-run as well, because as you start to get dehydrated, you start to lose water, you start to lose sweat and salt and all this sort of stuff. Your limb shape changes mid-run. If you can stay on that, you're also mitigating those issues by doing that research. And how we do that is gonna get tied into the answer to question number 3. But anyway, so what I've noticed since I switched to this system is when I'm sweating a lot and that vacuum starts to pull, and that sweat sock kind of prevents the water from pulling up, that suction tends to help filter and funnel that sweat up and out the back. It's not a pretty picture, but it's way better than basically turning into a swamp in the bottom of my socket and my liner that now my residual limb is just sitting in. And the skin gets softer faster, it gets rubbed quicker, it's less resilient. The vicious circle. We're aggressively in it. So for me, the fully elevated vacuum is a huge thing in combating sweat. I ran 26.2 miles, ran a marathon last year, did not take my leg off once, didn't need to, and I believe a lot of it has to do with that system. Oh, there he is. I had to keep looking around for the dog. And then the last thing he asked, or just getting out there and stacking the miles. So first off, or is not the word. And is the word. General health and socket system and stacking the miles. So the biggest mistake that gets made by all runners, or all aspiring runners, I guess I should say. People that have this tendency to start and stop and fail and struggle to develop a relationship with running, is they punish themselves right out of the gate, and they think that a run needs to finish with an empty tank. If you are new to this, your body is not used to recovering to that, or recovering from that. So it's going to recover very poorly. And you're either going to do a lot of overtrained, under-recovered running, which feels terrible and it's no fun, or you're going to need days and days of recovery, which prevents frequency. I have really come to the conclusion, because it's the only thing I've seen be consistently successful. When my athletes are willing to go with a slow buildup, and I tell them, you should be underwhelmed. You should finish these runs hungry for more. I can do more. I want to do it again. I want to do this and that. Like, I think that's the best way to start, because you can stack frequency. Shameless plug here, my little intro to running ebook. It is a 12, I call them checkpoints in the book. It's 12 checkpoints, and it builds you into, over the course of 12 workouts, assuming you don't repeat any of them, which is usually the case because this is a super simple time-based deal. And you work up into a 12-minute unbroken run. That's it. And in the book, I talk about it, and the people that run it, I've had so many people talk about how this is the first time I've actually enjoyed running. I'm ready to do more. They have that energy. They're now a couple weeks into their running habit, like, what's next? That's important. That's such a freaking important deal. So you have that emotional, which is a piece of stress management, both physical and mental. So we're tied back to one first question, or first piece of this question. And so you've got that piece of the puzzle now locked in. But the other things that does is that then allows us, and why it's important to, yes, stack the miles, but more importantly, stack frequency at lower volume, because then also, as you begin running, and now we're going more amputee specific, when you overdo your running really early on, you're going to end up with skin issues, you're going to break down, you're going to have a bunch of problems. And you're going to have them at high cost because you went out and did a high stress, maximal capacity workout before you understood how to recover from that kind of effort. Even if there's people doing way more. Give you a hint, there's always someone doing way more, and that's oftentimes not a thing to look up to, no matter how successful it appears. But so when you do these slow buildups, you will find and encounter those issues, but at a way lower cost, a cost that's going to keep you in your leg, a cost that's not going to cost you the next workout, a cost that's going to be enough to help you understand what we did well and what we didn't do well, but also you don't need to be beaten with a stick because you made a mistake. Like, holy shit, there's so many layers and levels to that are important and are true, and they're not connecting random dots. But just because you made a small mistake, like, why not do it? Why not make that mistake at a level where you can be like, oh, okay, this is recoverable. Failure's not fatal. And so if you build that progression, you follow the basics, and you follow the rules that every other runner should, and every other athlete should, whether or not we're running, lifting, etc., that's such a big piece of the puzzle. You about ready to go home, buddy boy? Yeah, you want a treat? Where's my good boy? Who's my good boy? You gonna stop harassing the citizens? Oh yeah, no, he's yelling at you to come play with him. But anyway, so so that's such a huge piece of the puzzle. It's just proper progression and knowing that, like, in your first couple, probably even months, you're not really ready to max out and cash out. Like, yeah, get tired. But there's a big difference between going to like 90, a little over 90% exertion, and 95, 98, 99, truly running, there's a big difference in that recovery need. And when you learn how to balance that, There's a lot of progress. You're on path for a lot of progress by managing that. And so you need to start by managing 70, 80% sort of stuff. And then again, we build up and we get better. And the last thing, and I talked about the thing that I was going to tie from the first one, skin health, or he called it leg health. Especially as an amputee, I do not change my coaching for able-bodied athletes in this regard. Thanks, loud car. I do not change my coaching for able-bodied athletes on this as well, but I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't come at a much higher cost for the amputee. You have to treat running as a skill. It is you have to work on your technique. The better your technique is, the better you're going to feel inside your socket, because the forces are all lining up the way your socket and your blade is designed. If you've got crappy technique, you're going to put more stress on the socket. And because you put more stress on the socket, it's because you're putting more stress, like you're not balanced. You're not in the right position and place. And so you need to get there. So you have to treat this as a skill. So you use these early workouts, and I'm learning to run. I'm practicing running. I'm building my skill of running. And I bet times, paces, etc., distances take care of themselves. And by I say I bet, I know that that's the case. I went from not running in 12 years to running a marathon on that. And I ran that marathon a little I wasn't preparing for a marathon. I was preparing for a 30K, and a whole bunch of things got screwed up, and I ended up in a marathon on 36 hours notice. No taper, I didn't crush it. But because I'd learned all those things, I learned how to at least take care of myself. And so that's such a big piece of the puzzle. So on that note, we're gonna wrap this guy up. Thanks for paying attention. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for learning something. If you have questions, I would love to take on more topics like this in different videos. If you got questions, put them in the comments. Want me to expand on something, put it in the comments. I'll get back to you. Thank you so much. On to the next one.